Hope everybody's weekend is going good and New Year started on the right foot. So today I'll be reading the national bestseller Financial Literacy for All. John Hope Bryant is about disrupting struggle, advancing financial freedom, and building a new American middle class. And today, the chapter I'll be reading is from section 11. It's about how did we get here, aka stories of broken capitalism. Capitalism. When I do well, society gets better. This, my friend, is the backbone of our American economy. Broken capitalism, when I do well, everyone else pays a price for it. As a nation, we're well acquainted with the biggest profiled version of broken capitalism. Chattel slavery. Slavery, as with all forms of broken capital, doesn't add true abundance to the economy. On the contrary, it creates an undue financial and spiritual burden on everyone involved. And in no uncertain terms, the bill will always come due because of the moral or of the universe bends toward justice. Okay. As we continue broken capitalism and its effects, I want you to ask yourself, how could this narrative have been different? Where could we have done better? And what are the tools and knowledge we need to create a society where everyone does well together? Excuse me. So now we're moving to chapter 3, Broken Capitalism and the Black and Brown People of America. This chapter could represent a book all by itself. Financial literacy, a hallmark of broken capitalism, and the poor are all too common combination of the more than 200 ethnic groups in the United States. I want to bring attention here. Broadly speaking, to Latinos, Native American Indians, and of course, African Americans. The Latino culture, with challenges and opportunities tied to financial literacy, that is easiest to single out is that of our Mexican brothers and sisters. Most of Mexico's challenges and experiences with versions of broken capitalism come respectfully from the unfortunate fiscal management of the new republic. Sometime after its freedom from Spain in 1821, and some would argue continuing into this present day, today, the average citizen of Mexico was never empowered with their own sense of financial agency. But it's not too late. Most people don't know that California was once part of Mexico. That's rather also Arizona, Nevada, Texas, Utah, and significant parts of 5 other U.S. states. It gives new context to those of Mexico descent streaming over the border, looking for a better life. Their current challenges around the legalization of citizenship, education, and ensuring that they are net positive economic contributors to the growing U.S. economy. By the way, most people also don't know that the second president of Mexico, Vicente Ramon Guerrero, was of African descent, a small point of pride and hope. Guerrero was the independence war general who successfully fought the Spanish on behalf of his Mexico. Then, after becoming president, he outlawed slavery in Mexico. This act both led to the succession of modern day Texas from Mexico and contributed to its being driven out of office. And then, of course, you have the well documented heartbreak of the Native American people in America. Too many now find themselves struggling on Indian reservations with insufficient education, a lack of financial resources and economic options, social isolation, and yes, a massive lack of financial literacy. In spite of the challenges, setbacks, and clear examples played against them in negotiated deal after negotiated deal over the years, which ties back to a lack of financial sophistication and understanding of a market economy. There are clear examples of how, when the right set of circumstances and opportunities to grow Native Americans' financial agency and freedom, the myriad successful Indian sponsored casinos, my opinion of gambling as a sustainable economic stabilizer for an entire society or population aside, and resorts underscores this point. Next, let's talk about African Americans. This story of broken capitalism I know firsthand. American slavery was many things that should trouble all of us. But at its core, it was the most egregious example to me of broken capitalism. Throughout history, Black Americans have faced unique barriers to economic growth, largely due to systematic and institutionalized racism. These barriers didn't simply hinder Black Americans, they shaped the economic and financial landscape of the entire nation. They put us on the path of broken capitalism. Jim Crow laws enforced racial segregation in the South, making it extremely difficult for Black individuals to start and run businesses or to gain meaningful employment. The systematic racism embedded in the policies and practices of financial institutions restricted access to loans, effectively excluding Black people from becoming homeowners and building wealth. Additionally, educational opportunities for Black communities were severely limited, preventing many from gaining the knowledge and skills necessary to compete effectively in the marketplace. In many ways, we merely brushed off the human and spiritual collateral damage slavery had on our national psyche, and kept on going. But there's have always been some among us intent on bringing America's focus more in line with her heart and soul. From our founding, they began laying a pathway to freedom, true freedom, for Black Americans. What I mean by true freedom is, in this very American sense, is financial freedom, an understanding of money and the ability to put it to work for you in the framework of the U.S. free enterprise system. On March 3rd, 1865, as the American Civil War was coming to a close, President Abraham Lincoln signed legislation creating the Freedmen's Bank. This bank was chartered with the sole mission of teaching formerly enslaved individuals about money. That's what financial literacy looked like circa 1865. Lincoln knew then, as we know today, that having a firm grasp on money is the fuel needed for economic uplift, and that it can secure the future for family for generations to come. The idea was simple and well intentioned. Provide a safe place for African Americans to save their money and a means to access credit. A first step toward financial inclusion, however, the reality was different, and the failure of the Freeman's book turned out to be one of the most significant disappointments in the early quest for Black economic empowerment. The bank was strategically located across the street from the White House and the U.S. Treasury Department, close enough for President Lincoln to look out the window and see one of his greatest Civil War freedom achievements. Had he lived to see it, unfortunately, hate lingered in the hearts of many who resisted Lincoln's vision for progress and change. A month later, he was assassinated for promising blacks the right to vote, among other initiatives that sought to elevate the social, economic, and political status of the formerly enslaved population. Despite the woeful and unfortunate setback, the dream of the Freeman's Book lived on, at least for a little while longer. Famed Frederick Douglass, who had escaped slavery himself, tried to run the bank, even lending it $10,000 of his own money, more than $165,000 in today's currency. Unfortunately, his investment and passion alone were not enough to keep the momentum going for the new venture. The framework had been laid, the structure erected, and the demand established. However, it failed because of a game system. Following Lincoln's assassination, bank trustees like Henry Coop chose the path of greed over the uplift of the nation. The bank was overseen largely by white trustees who lacked any understanding or empathy for the people they were meant to serve. They also invested the bank's deposits recklessly in risky ventures, eventually leading to its collapse. Cook, a prominent politically connected white man, even lent the bank's money to himself, something that was in clear and direct conflict with the bank's charter and rules. When the Freeman's Bank failed in 1874, thank y'all for viewing. I appreciate it. Yo, what's going on, Rylan? Thanks for tuning in. God bless you, man. Have a good day. Stay safe out there. Likewise. Hey, Jack, what's good? Can I believe in flat Earth? You gotta dive more into it and do your own investigation about flat Earth. When the Freeman's Bank failed in 1874, it shattered the dreams and life savings of more than 60,000 black depositors. To add insult to injury, the U.S. government didn't reimburse these depositors as it did during the savings and loan crisis of the 1980s and the Great Recession of 2008. The Freeman's Bank collapse was a devastating blow, both financially and psychologically, to a people who were nearly emancipated and trying to gain a foothold in a society stacked against them. As fate would have it, 150 years later, I had the honor of working with then U.S. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew and Treasury advisors including Amos Morgirty and Wally Adamo, who is today the Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Treasury Department and the highest ranking person of African descent to hold a role at the Treasury ever to rename the U.S. Treasury Annex Building to the Freeman's Bank Building. Wow. At the location of the original Freeman's Bank and next to the Freeman's Bank Building, my friend, the financier Michael Milken, is now building his Milken Center for the advancement of the American dream, focused on celebrating the nation's aspirations, and inspiring a new generation of dreamers. I am told that the center plans on featuring the importance of the financial literacy in their halls. The failure of the Freeman's Bank was a bitter lesson for Black America. It was a stark introduction to the harsh realities of broken capitalism, a system that promised fairness and equality for all but often delivered the opposite for some. The first Reconstruction and the Black middle class saga. The failure of Freeman's Bank is just one story of how America engaged in the cycle of change and uplift, especially when Black folks were at the center, and how we've fallen short as a nation just before making the yards for a metaphorical first down conversion. The end of the Civil War and the creation of the Freeman's Bank signaled the start of what the history calls the first Reconstruction period. It was all about freedom, not just Black freedom, but the freedom of our nation, the freedom to be, to strive, for me, to thrive and to live up to our creed. Freedom for all of our shared consciousness. Unfortunately, that shared freedom was short-lived. In the early 20th century, Black Wall Street was a powerful testament to the resilience and economic potency of the Black community. Less than 60 years out of slavery. I'm going to say that again. Less than 60 years out of slavery. blacks in Tulsa, Oklahoma, had constructed a fully functioning economy, a microism of what could have been replicated on a national scale. Business was flourishing. Property ownership was common. There was wealth creation, economic mobility, and a robust black middle class. Then came the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. White mobs systematically destroyed this prosperous district as an aggressive art of economic and racial warfare. It was a clear signal black economic progress would not be tolerated. The story of Roseville, Florida was sadly all too similar. In 1923, this thriving black town was leveled to the ground due to a racially motivated attack speared by a false accusation. I want you to imagine the economic potential that was destroyed that day. The destruction of these prosperous middle class black communities created a ripple effect of an economic setback that spanned generations. In large part, in large part, the period between 1865 and 1965 was a fast march backward for many marginalized groups in America, particularly African Americans. This is not hyperbole or emotionalism. This is cold, hard facts. The math of the matter. Quoting my friend Melody Hobson, which is now the chair of Starbucks and co-CEO of Ariel Capital Management in Chicago. I like math because it doesn't have an opinion. The math of the matter is that more than 60,000 formerly enslaved people, including black patriots who fought for the country in the Civil War, lost almost every dime in a bank they believed was backed by the federal government. As it was created by the federal government, it was not. And they lost almost everything because of the mismanagement of and by the white overseers of the day who helped themselves to loans designed for almost anyone but them. The fact of the matter is that sharecropping and convict leasing replaced slavery in everything but name in most parts of the slaveholding South. Some would argue that it did even more harm, at least economically, and as it relates to the aspirations of a people. At the same time, blacks were left out of the Western expansion of the United States, commonly known as the Homestead Act of 1862, which provided more than 160 acres to any individual willing to farm the land of the 270 million acres. The math is that more than 246 million acres went to white families. 96% of all parents are patents, all grant patents. About 1.6 million, I'm going to say that again, about 1.6 million white families receive land grants at 160 acres each, while less than 5,500, so that's 5,500 African Americans claimants received land patents. Back then, just like today, land is the central global asset where wealth comes from. Real estate remains the largest business sector in the world. So think of the impact that giving away 270 million acres, 10% of America's land, almost exclusively to white families, had on the economic landscape of America. The facts and math of the matter are that blacks were run off of the land experiment, known as 40 acres and a mule. Following Lincoln's assassination, Special Field Order 15, which came later as a bill, as a bit of a constellation prize to African Americans, promised 400,000 acres set aside just for the formerly enslaved. The land was concentrated along the East Coast, covering beachfront property from South Carolina down to Florida, extending 30 miles end to end. Each black family was to receive 40 acres. I want y'all to notice already the difference in size of the land grant patterns. But hold on for the broken capitalism part that's coming. Excuse me. While we all love beachfront property, and today's it's considered highly valuable, back in the 1800s, the agricultural age, it was virtually worthless. Sand doesn't hold planting seeds very well. They wanted a shot at the American dream and would use whatever they were given as a footstool up the ladder. They worked that land so hard that within a month of the initial award, Lincoln's team rewarded their industriousness with the mule, like giving someone a tractor for a farm today. Now here's the kicker. After Lincoln's assassination, as in President Lincoln, President Andrew Johnson taking over Special Field Order 15 was canceled completely. All of the 400,000 acres substandard property awards were returned to segregationist families. The planters that owned the land and had declared the war on the United States of America. That's crazy. I want y'all to think about this for a moment. All of it, please. Black folks fought for their country in a war against people who thought they didn't believe deserved equal rights under the law. Their reward? Having to give black the land that they had worked so hard to make usable, to the very segregationists who deemed them less than and whom they had won the war against. Slap in the face is not nearly a strong enough sentiment to describe this flagrant disrespect. And this was in addition of the tragic slight of the Homestead Act. These actions were more than just disrespectful to American servicemen and veterans who fought to preserve and uphold the integrity of our union and its ideals. They were bad business moves for America. Once that restricted the growth of our most valuable asset, our aspirations, and the economic growth that stems from it, these acts and so many others strip blacks of their pride and the hope that comes with being an American with moral agency and the ability to create change. The Jim Crow era. Jim Crow The Jim Crow era. Jim Crow played a particularly bleak role. Bleak role. I'm going to say it again. Bleak role in America's narrative of redemption and renewal. Jim Crow laws controlled the approximately 100-year period from 1865 to 1965, a century of broken capitalism. This uniquely American caste system was how the power maintained their advantages. They protected their American dream by denying blacks and other ethnic and social minorities access to it. It was broken capitalism. Jim Crow was in effect a gift to the American South. Southerners have been the better actors in the American Confederacy, but the federal government still needed them and didn't want to offend their sustainabilities. Instead of helping the Confederate South move past the period in the name of unity, our government pandered to them by allowing for the psychological and spiritual degradation of the black community. That's crazy. Under Jim Crow, blacks were given a form of freedom in the name, but were denied full access, power, and participation in the American social, political, and economic systems. This was how they disrupted the good work and progress blacks made during the first Reconstruction. It goes without saying that it left a trail of destruction in its path. Moving into the 20th century, after World War II, the federal government authorized the GI Bill, which gave returning war veterans the opportunity of a lifetime, a college education, new job skills, and a mortgage for a new home. This one act alone effectively created the modern industrial age middle class and triggered 60 plus years of economic growth and success. Unfortunately, only a very small fraction of African Americans benefited from the GI Bill. According to an analysis and report done by the History Channel. In 1947, only 2 of the more than 3,200 VA guaranteed home loans in 13 Mississippi cities went to black borrowers. And these sad statistics were not confined. And these sad statistics were not confined to the South. Noted historian Iron Katznelson. In New York and in the New Jersey suburbs, fewer than 100 of the 67,000 mortgages insured by the GI Bill supported home purchases by non-whites. And we haven't even addressed the power of what today we call redlining. More often than not, people I speak with attribute redlining to private banks, but the reality is that the government put this in place. In the 1930s, the FHA, Federal Housing Administration, the FHA, for the ones that don't know, Federal Housing Administration, literally drew a line across and over areas that were deemed too risky to guarantee mortgages in. Want to guess what these communities were in and who lived in these, you got it. Bingo. No banker in their right mind, be they racist as hell or a saint like Sunday school teacher, is going to write a mortgage loan for a property or to a borrower that the federal government has signaled exhibits a lack of safety and sound trust. In some cases, the government outright refused to insure safe mortgages as a result. Mortgages were primarily made in areas that were deemed safe and stabilized. Guess who lived there? To make matters worse, redlining raised values in those safe and stabilized areas as borrowers. They were thought to have prime access to capital. The pile-on effect was lowering property values everywhere else. The second Reconstruction. The second Reconstruction. Thank y'all for tuning in. Thank y'all for tuning in, though. Thank y'all for tuning in, everybody. Let me see. Let me shout out a few people. Mariana, Harry, Ree, London. Okay, Boricua. Kenny, appreciate it. Appreciate the support. So the second Reconstruction, that came from the Civil Rights Movement, which lasted from approximately 1955 to 1968 and was led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with Reverend Andrew Young, Reverend C.T. Vivian, and the host of A Sun She Rose, such as Dr. Dorothy Height and Miss Coretta Scott King by his side. This second Reconstruction period was marked, I'm going to say that again, was marked by a laser focus on access to the voting booth, access to public accommodations and facilities. Ooh, that's key right there. Access to the voting booth, access to public accommodations and facilities, and access to jobs in some careers. In 1968, Dr. King's focus turned sharply to economic justice, supported by my personal hero and mentor, Reverend Andrew Young. King announced the third element of a civil rights movement, the Poor People's Campaign, which is about bringing together the poor everywhere, white and black and brown together, into one movement about economics and money. This campaign to address economic inequality was a critical turning point in civil rights history. It signaled a shift in focus, recognizing that the fight for civil rights was inherently tied to economic rights. It gave blacks an interest to working class and middle class economic aspiration and opportunity, and the ability to cash a check. By the way, it's worthy of noting that Dr. King's most famous speech given in Washington, D.C. some years earlier was at a march entitled The March for Jobs and Freedom. And in that speech, He stated, America has presented its colored people a bad check, a check marked insufficient funds. He also famously said, it's all right to tell a man to lift himself by his bootstraps, but it is crucial just to say to a Buddhist man that he ought to lift himself by his bootstraps. These two sentences encapsulated. That's key right there. Or these two sentences encapsulated. There it goes. His views on the struggle of the economically disadvantaged, i.e., the Buddhists in our society. The campaign sought for equality in the eyes of the law and the eyes of the economy too. It was no longer a matter of securing seats in the same restaurants or the front of the bus. It was about securing an equal footing on the economic ladder. It was aimed at addressing economic disparities for all marginalized groups, advocating for living wages, accessible quality education, and affordable housing. It was a grand vision to redefine American society, not by ignoring the color of people's skin, but by acknowledging it and making sure it didn't limit one's economic opportunities. Dr. King's dream was of a nation that would not only provide civil rights, but also pave the way for economic rights, ensuring a robust middle-class life was accessible to all, regardless of their race. He deeply understood the limitations of having the right to sit at the counter, but not having the means to afford the meal. Unfortunately, Dr. King was assassinated. Crazy. Before the campaign could gain full momentum. I like to think that his economic vision persists today and finds resonance with organizations like Operation Hope. Now, this was just after the middle of the 20th century. Where we are talking about here, less than 75 years ago. That means that less than 2 generations ago, entire groups of people couldn't vote, couldn't even enter certain establishments legally, and had very few and treacherous ways of climbing the socio-economic ladder. I make this point to underscore the ridiculousness of those who submit that blacks should be fine by now. The math of the matter is that this nation, United States of America, was engaged in the broken capitalism of slavery for 250 years. About 2/3 of the existence of the nation itself. And up to this day, almost 75 years since the start of the civil rights movement, blacks and other minority groups are still fighting for equal access to the American dream. The truth is that Black Americans have never been allowed to fully participate in the free enterprise system. Progress has been made, yes, but we're still dealing with the repercussions of centuries of exclusion and disenfranchisement. As we reflect on these historical narratives, remember that we're not revisiting history. just for the sake of it. These stories serve as critical reminders of why financial literacy is not a luxury, it's a necessity, and it's our collective responsibility to make it accessible for all. The third reconstruction begins with you. Of course, I wonder all the time what should have happened to the dream of freedom for all had the dreamer not been slain. I say all the time today that the financial literacy is a civil rights issue of the generation and a part of a new civil rights movement. But what if Dr. King had lived and advanced this critically important unfinished work? Would this have naturally led to financial literacy becoming a part of Dr. King's movement? Of course, we will never know. But Dr. King's chief lieutenant, Dr. Andrew G. Young today, is the global spokesman for Operation Hope, often says to live in a system of free enterprise and yet not to understand the rules of free enterprise is the very definition of slavery. Bill Fair. That was written by Bill Fair. I agree with him. And this is also the essence of financial literacy today. This is also a problem we can solve. Each of these moments in history was not only an attack on the black community, but also a systematic dismantling of black wealth. They have contributed significantly to the racial wealth gap we see today. According to the Brookings Institution, the net worth of a typical white family was nearly 10 times greater than that of a black family in 2020. Crazy. I'm going to read that again. According to the Brookings Institution, the net worth of a typical white family was nearly 10 times greater than that of a black family in 2020. Only 5 years ago. This is not a matter of an individual effort or personal responsibility. This is a matter of systematic failure. It's a failure of our institutions and our society to ensure that all citizens, regardless of their race, have a fair shot at the American dream. The economic disparity and wealth gap we've seen in modern America are the echoes of a system that has repeatedly coursed black prosperity. These historical events have not only shaped the modern economic landscape, but they also underline the importance of economic empowerment for black Americans. Financial literacy is one of the most vital tools in the quest to navigate and succeed within a rigid financial system. Despite the setbacks that we have faced as a nation in our journey toward progress and restoration, most of us remain hopeful. It's embedded in our national DNA, taking the lessons from the first and second reconstructions. Operation Hope is investing in a third reconstruction. The third reconstruction is about educating the African American community that has never been fully embraced. The Native American Indians whose land was stolen from them. The poor whites who were left behind when we shifted from a manufacturing economy, and every other group that has been left out of the mainstream success participation game, including the whole half of our population that are women. It is about teaching them how to win in America, how to write checks and not just cash them. I'm gonna read that again because that's key. It's about teaching them how to win in America, how to write checks and not just cash them. That means cash checks, being the CEO, being over the business and writing checks for others, not just working and getting checks for a company. How to become builders and wealth creators at a scale. In today's day and age, we need to remember what really matters. Hatred doesn't matter. The real colors to be concerned with is not black, brown, or white race. It isn't red or blue. Politics or bank or pink, blue, or rainbow gender either. The color that will unite to all is green. Money, as in the color of US currency. The third reconstruction will be the one that financial knowledge and making the American dream accessible to all. And it begins with each one of us. Thank y'all for tuning in. You know, I just read Financial Literacy for All by John Hope Bryant, one of my favorite books. I had to read it with y'all again because it was so many gems. So later or tomorrow, I'll be reading How Poor Whites Got Left Behind. Thank y'all for viewing. Keep thriving. Keep your head up. The best is yet to come. We're global.